What's the dumbest reason you've heard for a couple getting divorced? 1. My ex divorced me after his best friend died of a drug overdose. He left me to be with his best friend's girlfriend. He felt he needed to take care of her, now that his friend was gone. We had only just met her at the funeral. They broke up within 2 weeks. 2. We had only just met her, but I'm assuming he had met her quite a few times? 3. Not necessarily. Sounds like two people in grief misunderstanding the bond it created as true love. But, also, yeah, maybe they were cheating before. 4. Nico is correct. They 100% had not met before. The best friend had moved away and lived out of state. We hadn't seen him for a year or 2, and so we hadn't met his girlfriend yet. Sadly, I really liked her too, at the time. 5. I knew a couple who had been married for 25 years, and were always supporting each other in what they wanted to do, got on well, doted on their daughter, shared hobbies, and from the outside seemed happy. She called me to say they were divorcing, and when I asked if there was anything I could do to help, or if she would like me to babysit while they went to couples counseling, she said no. He wanted the heating on all day every day, and she found it too warm, so there was no way to recover from this. I'm assuming there was more to it. 6. If I take it at face value that it was too warm in the house, I'd put money on her also being in perimenopause, at which point having a house kept very warm could feel like a torture chamber. And that's also a fun life stage where you can become very fed up with all the accumulated bullshit from the previous 25 years. 7. Can confirm. It's winter now and I'm still freezing my husband out the damned house. I even go out at night on the porch and just bask in the cold because it feels so good. I'm burning up all the goddamn time. 8. I was listening to a podcast that said how usually quality of life for women in perimenopause is worse than when in menopause because they get dismissed by doctors as nothing wrong since not menopause yet. You could be miserable for 10 years with no one listening, and then your partner refuses to put on a sweater and makes you hot all the time. I can definitely see that being the breaking point, especially since his attitude was probably indicative of the rest of the relationship. 9. Apparently, from what my dad told me, my mom divorced him because in a past life, she was a Native American, and my dad was the cowboy that killed her. My dad realized the crazy and didn't fight it. Oh, and apparently she told him there's an entity on Jupiter who protects Earth from world-ending asteroids. So thanks to that entity, I guess? 10. Entity on Jupiter who protects Earth from world-ending asteroids. I mean, this part is true if gravity counts as an entity. 11. That part checks out, but if I recall, it was some celestial entity named Juthro, or something like that. I'll have to see if my uncle remembers any of that. 12. Juthro sounds like a space redneck. 13. I'm getting divorced because my wife found out that the only thing that helps her depression is my modafinil. She figured out how to order them from India. Takes them at 5 to 10x's the dosage, then hallucinates about me having affairs. Best part is, none of her piece of shit family and friends have the guts to tell her it isn't real. And I'm not talking about things that can go either way. My wife accused me of staying in a hotel in Vegas with my girlfriend. Instead of going to work, I left the house at 7 p.m. and was home at 6 a.m., and I live in Philadelphia. She has a folder on her phone labeled Evidence, with hundreds of screenshots of absolute nonsense. It's heartbreaking. 14. Sounds like schizophrenic delusions. Scary that a drug can have the same effect if abused. 15. It's a stimulant, or rather a wakefulness-promoting agent, not to the same degree of things like Ritalin or Adderall but on the edges. I can honestly empathize with people realizing that they need pharmacological assistance to live a healthy life. I have ADHD myself. However, this is clearly abuse and uninformed abuse to boot. No way that this is less harmful than alternatives. That said, this looks like she doesn't sleep and has sleep deprivation hallucinations, which may look like schizophrenia or general delusions. 16. It's more of a tiredness inhibitor than a stimulant or wakefulness promoter. 17. Sometimes drugs can cause schizophrenia, which could also be it. More that a person with latent schizophrenia can have symptoms appear earlier, stronger after drug abuse, but yeah. 18. I have bipolar 2, and even too much caffeine will set me off. 19. I thought I was bipolar 2 for years and years and years, but it turns out I'm ADHD, and absolutely cannot have marijuana under any circumstances. Glad I got that sorted, but I feel sad for all of the relationships I tanked along the way by being so erratic. 20. There are many reasons I divorced my ex, but almost every one can be traced back to then undiagnosed bipolar disorder. His family told him I was imagining things, that everything he'd done, including something I had no knowledge about until he was arrested, was my fault and I'd made him do it. I was made out to be the evil one. They even managed to destroy a 2-decade-old friendship my parents had with another couple because of it. And then he had a psychotic break in his mother's kitchen, 4 years after our divorce, when the kids and I lived 400 kilometers away. All of a sudden he was mentally ill and maybe I was the devil incarnate. But the first year of our marriage was great, just like our relationship before marriage. The second year is when I watched things slowly changing and started asking questions and asking him to see a doctor. It was a full decade from his arrest to the break. It was like being inside the passenger car of the world's slowest train wreck. I'm sorry you're in this place. I know it all too well. And even with the kids, I can still say the divorce was the best possible outcome for the situation. The kids are now 19 and 18 and have told me that things got better for them when we split up, because the arguing stopped. And once he was on meds, even more so. But even with the right meds, he's never going to be the person I married again. 21. Oh man, I'm sorry dude. I'm just a kid with no life experience, so I have no advice but good luck and I hope somehow things can work out. 22. The dumbest excuse I ever heard was when my now ex-wife told me we needed to divorce because a palm reader said I wasn't her soulmate. Apparently, the guy she was fucking behind my back for months was her soulmate, and had nothing to do with why we needed to divorce. 23. Sound like the palm reader was looking out for ya? That sucks, dude. 24. Plot twist, palm reader was in on it. 25. Sounds like the palm reader had a hand in all of this. 26. Is she still with her soulmate? Maybe the quack mixed up soulmate and deserve each other? Because those two bozos definitely do. 27. They're still together, and from what I hear beyond miserable. It brings me joy. Both of them demonized and terrorized me during the divorce to cover up that they're cheating jackasses. They absolutely deserve each other. 28. Sometimes the best revenge is living a happy life. 29. My half-aunt was wanted for murder in Oregon, so her husband said, "Divorce me, and then they can't make me testify against you." So they divorced. And lived together for the next 50 years, in Washington state. No, I know. It doesn't make any sense to me either. 30. Not only stupid, it's the opposite of the law. Spouses can't be compelled to testify against each other. Divorce doesn't help with anything. 31. I've been baffled all my life by this. They genuinely loved each other and everything. But they really got that law wrong back in the day. 32. I mean, it doesn't sound like she spent any time in prison, so task failed successfully. 33. There's a lot of details about this story that somehow the divorce part of it is the least interesting thing about it. 34. The husband laughed at a joke that was made at the wife's expense. It was their son's birthday party, and things had been tense for a while, but they'd been trying to work on the marriage. A relative was lighting the birthday candles and the wife said, "Why didn't you start lighting from the middle instead of the edge?" The relative retorted, "I thought about doing it that way, but I was worried you'd have nothing to complain about." The husband laughed, the wife stormed off, and that was the end of that. As is always the case, there was more to it. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back. 35. I gotta know whose relative said that. With that sort of comment, there's a huge difference between, say, her brother and his mom. Like, was this a good-natured joke that didn't land, or very thinly veiled attack? 36. A joke that didn't land, I'd say. It was the husband's cousin, but they'd been married over 20 years, so she knew this cousin extremely well and was familiar with his sense of humor. And she didn't get mad at the cousin, just at her husband for laughing at her. 37. I'm stealing that line for the next time someone criticizes me. Won't take long to use it. 38. We still use it in my family, even knowing it once caused a divorce. 39. My client and his wife were into a role-playing game, I think Second Life. Everyone had an avatar. I suspect that his and his wife's were much more sprightly than they were in real life. Anyway, he suspected that she was being unfaithful to him in the game, so he created a fake avatar and stalked her in the game. Sure enough, she was running around on him, having virtual sex with another bloke, or bloke avatar anyway. That was it. 40. That sounds extremely like Second Life lol. I would say that like 60 to 70% of people in Second Life are benign or friendly, just absolutely stuck in 2006 in a very real way. Like, the culture of the Second Life spaces they visit has gone virtually unchanged since pre-2010. The kind of places and people where you hear a song from 2012 and go, oh wow, some modern music. The other 30 to 40% are like, absolutely buck wild. I met someone at a grimdark club bar, owned by a Harley Quinn and Joker role player duo who were surprisingly nice, whose profile was 100% serious that she was the ghost of famed pirate Mary Red. In Second Life. I think she was spooning with a succubus. Like she wasn't rude or anything but just an absolute cryptid. But within that 30 to 40% there are like a niche of even stranger people. I'm talking people who spend real money to buy role-playing HUDs that require you to spend even more real money to buy virtual food to eat for sustenance, and that food has a real-life expiry date at which point the food disappears is inedible. A friend who deep dove into learning about this stuff found out that apparently farming virtual worms to grow crops for this particular HUD is a decent way to make money. The drama among these people, whose Second Life basically is their first life, is absolutely insane. We loaded into a virtual Walmart parking lot to find people having a whole ass screaming fight about if someone was sleeping around a skank. In Second Life. I don't really have a conclusion to this, but I 100% believe it. There is a breed of Second Life player who gets way too invested, and before you know it they have Second Life children and run a virtual hoa. 41. A friend who deep dove into learning about this stuff found out that apparently farming virtual worms to grow crops for this particular HUD is a decent way to make money. My sister, a studio artist, has made more money from selling art on Second Life than in real life. She's quietly ashamed. 42. When I was young, I asked my grandparents a couple times why they divorced. They couldn't stand each other at all, so I was always very proud of them for at least being able to agree to tell me they divorced over a TV. She wanted it. He didn't. They're of the devil, he told me. You just don't throw out someone's TV. She was still upset about it even 15 years after their divorce. Last year, I was Googling someone else just to see what I could find on him. I still have no information on his current whereabouts, but I did get a result for a court summary he was mentioned in during my grandparents' divorce. I read that whole thing to find what really happened. And I shit you not? It ended with the judge declaring that the TV was the cause of their divorce. There were 2 other potential causes brought up, an alleged affair and I don't remember the other, but the judge said they weren't causes because of timing, lack of evidence, and other closely occurring events. 43. I heard from my friend who is a lawyer who told me he had a client file for divorce because every morning his wife would ask him how he takes his coffee. For 7 years. 44. I feel like I'm hearing that his wife hadn't listened to him once in 7 years. 45. Or that she really didn't want to make his coffee and was too subtle about it. 46. I don't know if this counts, but my aunt has been married 4 times. Bob 1. Divorced, married Bob 2. Divorced. Remarried Bob 1. Divorced. Married some homeless guy. For me, it's the remarrying Bob one I just don't get. 47. My grandmother's fourth husband was also her second husband. He cheated on her in the late 1960s, not too long into their marriage. They split but didn't do the paperwork. She lived with another guy, who my cousins all spoke fondly of, for 10 to 12 years. Then they broke up and she met someone else, divorced number 2 to marry the new guy who I knew as my grandpa sometime in the early 80s. After number 3 fled the state following some poor financial choices with some less than savory folks, they stayed married in case he could one day come back. The relationship was good, but gambling is a hell of a drug, but he passed away while still on the run. A couple years later, Grandma decides old number 2, who she'd kept in touch with off and on in the way you do in the limited social circle of a smallish town, might be past the stage of his life where he was running with his nether regions. They remarried 20 plus years after their first courthouse ceremony and stayed together until his death, which was funnily enough a heart attack during martial activities. Good for them, though, for being in their 70s and still excited enough about each other to sneak off for an afternoon tryst. 48. He was flamboyantly gay. Somehow, she missed what even the kids knew. They went on their honeymoon. He came home and made sure everyone knew how disgusted he was. Humiliated that lady and discussed private moments. Never saw them together after the wedding, and she went on to do well for herself. 49. My childhood friend married a girl I warned him about. He turned on me hard and accused me of wanting her for myself. Okay, homie, you do you. She cheated on him on the honeymoon night. Had something going with her ex on the side. 50. She met a convict grifter 30 years younger who became her sugar baby. She proceeds to pour money on him. He gets arrested and breaks his parole, but all of her money went to his commissary. Finally he gets out and they have like a few months together before he ditches her for his meth dealer. A destroyed family over a jerk. Thanks. 51. My friend quit her job and decided she wanted to be an artist, and made no money at it. Her husband worked at the same place she did. When she left, it caused so much drama and they were bad-mouthing her so bad that he had to quit. He started doing freelance work, which didn't pay as much, but it was something. They lost the house and car because they couldn't afford it if she wasn't working. She blamed him and left him because he wasn't being a good provider. He ended up getting a job in his field, and 18 years later, she still isn't making any money doing her art. 52. The whole quit your job to chase your dreams thing doesn't always work out. I feel like the positive stories always get circled around and we never hear enough of the negative ones. The positive ones are so heartwarming, but there's also serious consequences to the negative ones that people need to know about. 53. That guy that kept trying to force his wife that doesn't like mustard to eat mustard. 54. My auntie divorced because they squeezed toothpaste from different ends. One of them likes to squeeze the tube from the bottom and the other from the top. She remarried and is happy with her second husband. Edit, yes, it actually is about toothpaste. And they had their own tubes each. 55. Oh man. That reminds me of the time my husband approached me dead serious and said he wanted to talk about something. I thought, shit. Something is majorly wrong. We were together for about 12 years. And then he very gingerly explained that I always squeeze the toothpaste from the middle, but he likes it squeezed from the end. What? Apparently he was expecting this to be a big deal. I had never thought about it, so said okay. I'll make sure to do it that way from now on if it matters to you. I was so relieved. 56. Save your marriages, get a toothpaste tube squeezer. 57. I knew a guy who got divorced because he and his wife stopped enjoying sex with each other. I asked him if he had talked to her about what she likes and tried doing more foreplay. He said no and was absolutely not willing to do either thing. Basically, he expected her to just deal with him going in dry for the rest of their lives. 58. It's like some of our dead bedrooms posts where Op insists that having a newborn and his wife being a Sam has nothing to do with her sudden lack of desire, refuses to do anything and weirdly demands that commenters give him a permission to divorce her or cheat. 59. Two friends of mine had babies, several years apart. One had a fairly traumatic birth experience, lots of tears, baby got stuck, vacuum birth etc., and she was pretty traumatized. Plus the baby was fussy and basically never slept or only slept on her. She also had complications post-birth and in general lost herself a bit, felt unattractive etc. My second friend also had a somewhat traumatic birth, due to an unexpected C-section and recovery from that. She'd really wanted a child and was willing to do whatever, but even she admits that imagining having a child and then actually having it is as good as comparing summer and winter, a whole different ballgame. They both said that their respective SOs were made to wait months after they'd given birth. I think in one case it was nearly a year even. Mostly due to being exhausted as a parent and feeling out-touched by the baby and having to deal with them all time, but also the birth being much more traumatic and people involved than they had imagined. I know one of them was worried about their relationship imploding because of waiting, but they literally told me that they felt revulsion merely at the thought of having sex, partly because of their post-birth body, partly because of exhaustion and sleep deprivation, and partly because of birth itself. I don't think most men understand at all, and majority of men don't understand enough what a changed life experience giving birth is. I think for most men, there wasn't a baby and then there was a baby and that's just it. The rest of the changes come more gradually to them, apart from the little person you need to keep alive and fed and warm them. The men don't get the hormonal and emotional whiplash that women do. They get the external experience of hormonal imbalance, but physically their bodies don't experience the same. They don't have to physically birth the baby nor experience the discomforts of pregnancy. I think for many men, a lot doesn't even change. Many of them still go to work, still hang out with friends etc. 60. Sounds like my ex. When we broke up, he wanted to have breakup sex and actually do foreplay to give a better impression of him to leave with. I felt so much disgust when he was smiling and cheerfully trying to persuade me it was a good idea. Too, he was in a new relationship and monogamous. Come on, I'll go down on you, I'll give you orgasms. You know, the shit, I had been needing to actually reach an orgasm and he never did. Nope. Didn't care about my satisfaction in the relationship. Why soil myself with his mediocre attempts to correct a several-year-long impression of him being a bad sexual partner? Of course he made those offers after I met a very sexy, older man who could have written the book She Comes First. 61. I heard of a couple getting divorced in their 80s. When asked why they left it so late, they said, "We didn't want to do it while the children were still alive because it would have upset them."